How dare you give her a kid's portion? Entitled, Aunt loses it over a plate of food at my own celebration. Those words still echo in my mind weeks later. What should have been a perfect celebration turned into a nightmare when my uncle's wife decided to make a scene over dinner portions. My name is Ashley, I'm 22 years old, and this is the story of how one woman's sense of entitlement nearly ruined the most important day of my life. The woman in question isn't even technically my aunt, she's my Uncle Thomas's wife Denise, and after what happened, I refused to give her that title of respect. What started as a simple family celebration became a declaration of war over a dinner plate. Let me take you back to where this whole mess began, because understanding Denise's history with our family makes what happened even more outrageous. My Uncle Thomas married Denise about 4 years ago when I was 18 and just starting college. At first, we all genuinely tried to welcome her into our tight-knit family. My mom Carol, being the peacekeeper she's always been, went out of her way to include Denise in everything: family barbecues, holiday dinners, birthday parties. We wanted Uncle Thomas to be happy, and if Denise made him happy, then we were willing to embrace her with open arms. Uncle Thomas had been alone for so long after his divorce from my actual Aunt Rebecca, who we all adored. Rebecca was warm, funny, and treated all of us kids like we were her own. She'd bring homemade cookies to every family gathering, remember everyone's birthdays, and always had the best stories that kept us laughing for hours. When Thomas and Rebecca divorced, it wasn't messy or bitter, they just grew apart over the years. Rebecca remained part of our family even after the divorce, and we still invited her to major celebrations because she was genuinely loved by everyone. Then came Denise. From the very first family dinner, something felt off about her. She had this way of looking around the room like she was evaluating everything and everyone, determining what was worthy of her time and attention. But we chalked it up to nervousness. Meeting a whole new family can be intimidating, right? Uncle Thomas seemed smitten with her, constantly talking about how sophisticated and refined she was compared to his previous relationships. Denise brought her daughter Megan to these gatherings, a quiet 12-year-old who seemed nice enough but always looked uncomfortable around her own mother. Megan would try to join in conversations with my younger cousins, but Denise would quickly redirect her attention, saying things like, "Megan doesn't play those childish games," or, "She's more mature than that." It was weird, but again, we tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. The first real red flag came at my cousin Tyler's birthday party about 2 years ago. Tyler was turning 8, and we were all gathered at my Aunt Lisa's house for a typical kids' party: pizza, games, and a superhero-themed cake. All the kids were running around having a great time, including some of the older cousins who were teenagers but still enjoyed the silly games. Megan was sitting alone at a table, looking like she wanted to join in but afraid to move. I walked over to her and said, "Hey Megan, want to come play freeze dance with us? It's really fun." Before Megan could even respond, Denise appeared out of nowhere and said, "Megan doesn't need to participate in these juvenile activities. She's reading a book about advanced mathematics. She's far too intellectual for this nonsense." The poor kid looked embarrassed and disappointed. I tried to lighten the mood by saying, "Well, maybe after she finishes her chapter, she can join us for cake." Denise gave me this condescending smile and replied, "We'll see if there's anything here suitable for her refined palate." It was a kid's birthday party with pizza and cake. What wasn't suitable about that? But I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause drama at Tyler's celebration. Looking back, I should have said something then. Maybe if we'd called out her behavior earlier, she wouldn't have felt so emboldened to pull what she did at my graduation party. As time went on, more incidents piled up. At Christmas dinner, Denise complained that our family tradition of everyone bringing a dish to share was chaotic and unprofessional. She suggested that in the future, one person should handle all the cooking to ensure quality control. My mom had been hosting these potluck-style Christmas dinners for over 20 years, and they were everyone's favorite tradition. But Denise acted like we were all barbarians who didn't understand proper entertaining. During Easter, she criticized the way my grandmother set the table, saying the silverware wasn't arranged according to proper etiquette standards. My grandmother, who had been hosting elegant dinner parties since before Denise was born, just smiled politely and changed the subject. But I could see the hurt in her eyes. The worst part was watching Uncle Thomas gradually change. He started making excuses for family gatherings, saying Denise wasn't feeling well or they had other commitments. When they did show up, he seemed tense and apologetic, constantly trying to smooth over Denise's rude comments. It was like he was walking on eggshells around her. My mom tried talking to Uncle Thomas privately a few times, expressing concern about how isolated he seemed. But he would just say that Denise was helping him become more refined and sophisticated, that she was elevating him to a higher social level. It was heartbreaking to watch my funny, laid-back uncle transform into this anxious people-pleaser. The breaking point should have been at my cousin Jake's wedding last year. Denise showed up wearing a white dress, not exactly white, but a cream color that was clearly meant to draw attention away from the bride. When my Aunt Helen politely mentioned that the color might be inappropriate, Denise snapped back that she wasn't about to let small-town fashion rules dictate her wardrobe choices. The bride, my sweet cousin Anna, was too kind to say anything, but her face said it all. During the reception, Denise spent the entire evening criticizing everything from the flower arrangements to the choice of venue. She loudly proclaimed that if this were her daughter's wedding, she would have chosen somewhere more upscale and elegant. Meanwhile, poor Megan sat next to her, looking mortified as her mother made a spectacle of herself. But even after all of that, my family tried to keep the peace. We loved Uncle Thomas, and we didn't want to force him to choose between us and his wife. My mom kept saying that maybe Denise just needed more time to adjust to our family dynamic. Dad was less optimistic, often muttering under his breath about how she was a piece of work, but even he tried to be civil for Uncle Thomas's sake. Now let me tell you about the celebration that changed everything. I had just graduated from college with honors, completing my degree in elementary education. It was a huge milestone for me because I was the first person in my family to finish college. My parents were incredibly proud, and they wanted to throw a proper celebration to mark the occasion. We decided to host the party at our local country club, which might not sound fancy to some people, but for our small town in Ohio, it was the nicest venue available. My mom spent weeks planning every detail. She coordinated with the club's catering staff, arranged for flowers, and sent out beautiful invitations to all our family and close friends. This wasn't just a casual backyard barbecue, this was meant to be an elegant celebration befitting such an important achievement. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. We'd have a cocktail hour when guests arrived, followed by a sit-down dinner, and then dancing and desserts afterward. Since we knew there would be several children attending, my young cousins, family friends' kids, and of course Megan, my mom made special arrangements with the catering staff. All the children, including myself as the guest of honor, would receive smaller, kid-friendly portions of the main course. This wasn't about treating anyone as lesser, it was practical planning. You see, my mom had ordered an elaborate dessert spread that included not just my graduation cake, but also an ice cream sundae bar, chocolate fountains, and an assortment of pastries and cookies. She knew that after all those sweets, nobody would want a huge dinner. The kid portions were perfect, enough to satisfy hunger without ruining appetites for the real stars of the evening, the desserts. I was actually excited about getting a smaller portion myself. I had been looking forward to that dessert table for weeks, and I wanted to save room for everything. My mom had even special ordered my favorite childhood cookies from a bakery 3 towns over. The whole thing was planned with love and thoughtfulness, designed to make everyone happy and comfortable. The evening started beautifully. Guests began arriving around 6 o'clock, and the country club's main dining room looked absolutely stunning. My mom had chosen a color scheme of gold and navy blue, my college colors, and the tables were decorated with gorgeous centerpieces featuring white roses and gold accents. Soft jazz music played in the background, and everyone was dressed in their finest clothes. Uncle Thomas and Denise arrived fashionably late, as had become their custom. Denise was wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my mom spent on decorations for the entire party, and she made sure everyone noticed by commenting loudly about how she'd driven to Columbus specifically to shop for something appropriate for such an occasion. Megan trailed behind her parents looking uncomfortable in what was clearly a new dress that was far too formal for a 12-year-old. During the cocktail hour, everything went smoothly. People mingled, shared stories about my college years, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. My dad gave a short speech about how proud he was of my accomplishment, and several family members shared funny memories of my childhood dreams of becoming a teacher. Even Denise seemed to be on her best behavior, though I noticed she spent most of her time talking to my mom's friend Janet, who worked at the bank and drove a Mercedes. Denise always seemed drawn to people she perceived as having money or status. As we transitioned from cocktails to dinner, the catering staff began seating everyone at their assigned tables. My mom had spent considerable time on the seating chart, trying to group people in ways that would encourage good conversation and minimize potential conflicts. She had wisely seated Denise and Uncle Thomas at a table with some of our more patient relatives, people who were skilled at navigating difficult personalities. The first course, a delicious butternut squash soup, went off without a hitch. Everyone complimented the food and the beautiful presentation. I was sitting at the head table with my parents, grandparents, and my brother Mark, who had driven up from Cincinnati for the celebration. We were all laughing and sharing stories, and I felt so grateful to be surrounded by people who loved and supported me. Then came time for the main course, and that's when everything went horribly wrong. The waiters began serving the plates, starting with the adult portions for the grown-ups. The main course was herb-crusted chicken breast with roasted vegetables and wild rice pilaf, elegant but not too fancy, exactly what my mom had envisioned. The adult portions were generous and beautifully plated, garnished with fresh herbs and a light sauce that complemented the chicken perfectly. Then the waiters moved on to serving the children's portions. These were smaller servings of the same meal, presented on the same elegant china as the adult portions. The only difference was the quantity, maybe half the chicken, smaller scoops of vegetables and rice. They still looked beautiful and appetizing, just appropriately sized for younger appetites and the dessert extravaganza that would follow. I watched as my young cousins received their plates with big smiles. My 8-year-old cousin Emma looked thrilled with her portion, and my 10-year-old cousin Jake was already digging in enthusiastically. The kids understood the plan and were excited about saving room for the desserts they'd been hearing about all evening. When my plate arrived, I was delighted. The presentation was lovely, and the portion was exactly what I wanted. I had been so nervous about public speaking during the toasts that I hadn't eaten much all day, so even the smaller portion would be perfect for me. I was just about to take my first bite when I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. "Excuse me." Denise's voice cut through the pleasant dinner conversation like a siren. "Excuse me." Every conversation at every table stopped. The entire room turned to look at her as she stood up from her chair, pointing an accusing finger at the waiter who had just placed Megan's plate in front of her. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising with each word. "What do you think you're doing?" The poor waiter, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, looked confused and frightened. "Ma'am, this is the children's portion of tonight's meal. Is there something wrong with the preparation?" "Something wrong?" Denise's voice reached a pitch that made me wince. "How dare you give her a kid's portion?" The silence in the room was deafening. Every single person at every single table was staring at our family's drama unfolding in real time. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. This was my celebration, my special night, and she was turning it into a circus. "She is not a child," Denise continued, gesturing dramatically toward poor Megan, who was sinking lower in her chair with each passing second. "She is 12 years old. She is practically an adult. She deserves a proper adult portion, not this insulting child's meal." My mom, ever the diplomat, rose from her chair and walked over to Denise's table with her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Denise, please, let me explain the arrangement. All the children are receiving the same portion size, including Ashley. We have a wonderful dessert spread planned for after dinner, and we wanted to make sure everyone had room to enjoy it." "I don't care about your dessert spread," Denise shrieked, and I swear the wine glasses on nearby tables actually vibrated from the volume. "My daughter is being treated like a baby, and I will not stand for it. She is mature and sophisticated, unlike these other children. She deserves adult treatment." I looked around the room at the faces of my family and friends. My elderly grandmother looked shocked and upset. My little cousins looked scared and confused. My dad's face was turning red, always a dangerous sign. Even Uncle Thomas looked mortified, tugging on Denise's dress and whispering urgently for her to sit down. But Denise was just getting started. "This is completely unacceptable," she continued, now addressing the entire room as if she were giving a speech. "In a proper establishment, guests would be consulted about portion sizes. No one would dare assume that a young lady of Megan's caliber should be lumped in with actual children." The waiter, bless his heart, was still trying to maintain professional composure. "Ma'am, if you'd prefer, I can speak with the kitchen about preparing an adult portion. It might take a few extra minutes, but of course you can," Denise snapped. That's what should have happened in the first place. Someone should have asked what was appropriate instead of making assumptions. My mother, still trying to keep the peace, said gently, "Denise, we planned these portions carefully to make sure everyone could enjoy the full evening. Ashley is also getting a child's portion, and she's the guest of honor. It's really not meant as an insult to anyone." That's when Denise turned her fury directly on my mother, and I saw something in her eyes that I'll never forget. It wasn't just anger, it was contempt, pure and simple. "How dare you compare my daughter to her," she said, pointing at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "Megan has been raised with culture and refinement. She has sophisticated tastes and deserves to be treated accordingly. Just because you're comfortable treating your own daughter like a child doesn't mean you should impose that on mine." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I felt like I'd been slapped. This woman had just insulted me, my mother, and my entire family in front of everyone I cared about. At my own graduation celebration. on what was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. My dad started to stand up, his face now completely red, but my mom caught his eye and shook her head slightly. She was still trying to salvage the situation, still hoping to avoid a complete family meltdown in front of all our guests. "Denise," my mom said, her voice still calm but with a slight tremor that only I could detect, "I understand you want the best for Megan. Let me talk to the kitchen staff and see what we can arrange." Uncle Thomas finally managed to get Denise to sit down, whispering frantically in her ear. But the damage was done. The entire atmosphere of the party had changed. What should have been a joyful celebration now felt tense and uncomfortable. Guests were looking around awkwardly, not sure whether to pretend nothing had happened or address the elephant in the room. My mom disappeared into the kitchen for about 10 minutes, and when she returned, she was followed by a waiter carrying a full adult portion. As it turned out, my brother Mark wasn't feeling well and hadn't touched his meal, so there was an extra adult portion available. "Here we are," my mom announced with forced cheer as the waiter placed the large plate in front of Megan. Problem solved. But Megan looked absolutely miserable. She kept glancing between the enormous plate of food in front of her and the smaller, more manageable portions her young cousins were happily eating. The poor kid was clearly embarrassed by her mother's outburst, and now she was faced with a meal that was way too big for her 12-year-old appetite. Denise, however, looked triumphant. She surveyed the adult portion with satisfaction and said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "There. That's much more appropriate. I'm glad we could resolve this misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. As if my mother had accidentally insulted her daughter instead of carefully planning a celebration that would make everyone happy. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence at Denise and Uncle Thomas's table. I watched Megan push food around on her plate, managing to eat maybe a quarter of the massive portion before giving up. She kept looking longingly at the other kids' tables, where her cousins were finishing their appropriately sized meals and getting excited about the upcoming dessert service. When it came time for desserts, the irony was almost painful to watch. The dessert table was everything my mom had promised, a gorgeous display of cakes, pastries, ice cream, and candy that looked like something from a fairy tale. All the other kids rushed over with excitement and healthy appetites, ready to enjoy the sweet finale to the evening. But poor Megan could barely manage a small slice of cake because she was stuffed from the enormous dinner her mother had demanded. She sat at her table looking queasy while her cousins enjoyed ice cream sundaes and chocolate-covered strawberries. The very thing Denise had fought for, that oversized adult portion, had prevented her daughter from enjoying the best part of the celebration. I tried to salvage what I could of the evening. I gave my planned speech thanking everyone for coming and sharing in my special day. I cut my graduation cake and posed for pictures with family members. But the joy had been sucked out of the room by one woman's need to prove her superiority over everyone else. As guests began to leave, several people approached my parents to apologize for what had happened. My grandmother hugged me extra tight and whispered, "Don't let her steal your thunder, sweetheart. This is your night, and you should be proud." My dad's brother, Uncle Peter, shook his head and said, "I can't believe Thomas puts up with that behavior." Even more telling were the reactions from people who barely knew Denise. Janet, my mom's friend from the bank whom Denise had spent the cocktail hour schmoozing, came up to my mother and said, "I'm so sorry about that scene. What a terrible way to treat you in your own celebration." If someone who had just met Denise could see how inappropriate her behavior was, what did that say about our family's willingness to tolerate it for so long? Uncle Thomas and Denise were among the last to leave, mainly because Uncle Thomas spent 20 minutes apologizing to my parents while Denise gathered her things with an air of wounded dignity, as if she were the injured party in all of this. "I'm so sorry," Uncle Thomas kept saying. "I don't know what got into her. She's been stressed about work lately, and I think she just overreacted." My dad, who had been holding his tongue all evening, finally spoke up. "Thomas, this isn't about stress. This is about respect. She disrespected Ashley, she disrespected Carol, and she ruined what should have been a beautiful celebration." Uncle Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but what could he say? Everyone in that room had witnessed what happened. There was no spinning it or making excuses. As they were walking to their car, I overheard Megan say to her mother, "Mom, I would have been fine with the smaller portion." All my cousins had the same thing. Denise's response chilled me to the bone. "You need to learn to demand what you deserve, Megan. These people will walk all over you if you let them. What you deserve." As if being treated the same as everyone else was somehow an insult. As if my family had intentionally slighted them instead of including them in a carefully planned celebration. After everyone left, my parents and I sat in our living room, emotionally exhausted from the evening's drama. My mom looked defeated in a way I'd never seen before. I tried so hard to make everything perfect for you, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. I planned every detail, I bent over backward to accommodate everyone, and she still found a way to make it about her. That's when it hit me, this wasn't really about a dinner portion. This was about power and control. Denise couldn't stand the fact that she wasn't the center of attention at someone else's celebration. She couldn't tolerate being treated like everyone else because, in her mind, she's special and deserves special treatment always. The dinner portion was just an excuse to create drama and make herself the focal point of the evening. She succeeded in hijacking my graduation party and turning it into the Denise show, which I believe was her intention all along. Over the next few days, the family gossip network was buzzing with discussions about what had happened. My cousin's parents called to apologize and express their outrage. My grandmother called 3 separate times to make sure I was okay and to vent about Denise's appalling behavior. Even Rebecca, Uncle Thomas's ex-wife, heard about it through the family grapevine and sent me a beautiful flower arrangement with a note saying she was proud of my achievement and sorry it had been overshadowed by someone's selfishness. The most heartbreaking part was hearing from other family members about incidents they'd witnessed but never spoken up about. My cousin Lauren told me about a time when Denise criticized the way Lauren's mother disciplined her children, saying it was too permissive for children of their social standing. My Aunt Susan revealed that Denise had once asked her why she settled for such a small house, when she could clearly afford something more impressive. It became clear that everyone had been walking on eggshells around Denise for years, trying to keep the peace for Uncle Thomas's sake. But her behavior at my graduation party was the final straw for many family members. My parents made a difficult decision after that night. They told Uncle Thomas that while he would always be welcome at family gatherings, Denise was no longer invited unless she was willing to apologize and change her behavior. They explained that they couldn't continue to subject the family to her disrespectful treatment, especially the younger children who were starting to dread family events because of her presence. Uncle Thomas was devastated. He begged my parents to reconsider, promising that Denise would behave better in the future. But my dad stood firm. "Thomas, we've been making excuses for her for 4 years," he said. "We've tolerated comments, overlooked insults, and tried to be understanding. But what happened at Ashley's party was unforgivable. She attacked our daughter and our hospitality in front of our closest friends and family. Some lines can't be uncrossed." The sad part is that Uncle Thomas chose Denise over his family. Instead of standing up to his wife or demanding that she apologize, he gradually distanced himself from all of us. He stopped coming to family gatherings, stopped calling my grandmother regularly, and essentially allowed Denise to isolate him from everyone who had loved him long before she came into the picture. About 6 months after my graduation party, I ran into Megan at the grocery store. She was with a friend, and when she saw me, she looked embarrassed and tried to avoid eye contact. But I walked over and said hello because none of this was her fault. "Hi Megan," I said gently. "How are you doing?" She looked around nervously, as if her mother might appear from behind a cereal display and scold her for talking to me. "I'm okay," she said quietly. Then, even more quietly, "I'm sorry about your graduation party. I didn't want the big portion. I just wanted to eat with my cousins." My heart broke for this kid who was being raised by a woman who couldn't see past her own ego long enough to consider her daughter's feelings. "It wasn't your fault, sweetie," I told her. "I hope I'll see you again sometime." She nodded and hurried away with her friend, but not before I saw the sadness in her eyes. This 12-year-old girl was paying the price for her mother's selfishness, missing out on relationships with her extended family because Denise couldn't behave like a decent human being. That encounter really drove home the full tragedy of the situation. It wasn't just that Denise had ruined my graduation party, though she absolutely had. It was that her behavior pattern was damaging her own daughter's relationships and teaching her that demanding special treatment was more important than kindness, humility, or family bonds. Looking back now, I can see that the graduation party incident was just the culmination of years of entitled behavior that our family had been too polite to confront directly. Denise had been testing boundaries and pushing limits from the moment she joined our family, and we kept giving her chances to prove she could change. But people like Denise don't change. They escalate. They take your patience as weakness and your kindness as permission to treat you poorly. Every time we overlooked a rude comment or made excuses for her behavior, we were actually enabling her to become worse. I learned something important that night about standing up for yourself and your family. Sometimes keeping the peace isn't worth the cost. Sometimes you have to be willing to cause a little drama in order to protect the people you love from someone who sees their kindness as an opportunity to take advantage. My mom had spent my entire graduation celebration trying to manage Denise's expectations and avoid conflict. She compromised her own vision for my special day, asked the kitchen staff to make accommodations, and bent over backward to make one unreasonable woman happy. And in the end, it didn't matter because Denise was determined to find something to complain about. If we had set clear boundaries from the beginning, if we had called out her rude behavior at that first birthday party or her inappropriate comments at family dinners, maybe things would have been different. Maybe Uncle Thomas wouldn't have felt like he had to choose between his wife and his family. Maybe Megan would still have relationships with her cousins and grandparents. But you can't change the past. You can only learn from it and do better going forward. The silver lining to this whole mess is that it brought the rest of our family closer together. Without Denise's constant negativity and criticism poisoning family gatherings, our celebrations became more relaxed and joyful. The younger cousins started having more fun because they weren't walking on eggshells, afraid of saying or doing something that might set off Denise's disapproval. My grandmother, who had been growing increasingly quiet at family events because she was tired of having her hosting choices criticized, became her old vibrant self again. She started telling her famous stories and offering unsolicited advice with renewed enthusiasm. Even my more reserved relatives seemed to open up more without the constant tension that Denise brought to every gathering. It's been almost a year since my graduation party, and I can honestly say I'm grateful that Denise showed her true colors so dramatically that night. If she had continued with her more subtle forms of disrespect and manipulation, our family might have endured years more of her toxic behavior. Her explosive reaction to a simple dinner portion revealed exactly who she is and what she values. She values superiority over kindness. She values being right over being respectful. She values her own ego over her daughter's happiness and her husband's family relationships. Those are choices that reveal character, and her character is deeply flawed. I feel sorry for Uncle Thomas, and I feel even sorrier for Megan. They're both trapped in a relationship with someone who sees other people as props in her personal drama rather than individuals worthy of respect and consideration. Uncle Thomas chose that situation for himself, even if he doesn't fully understand what he's chosen. But Megan didn't choose it, and she's the one who will pay the highest price. Sometimes I wonder if Denise realizes how much damage she's done. Does she understand that her need to feel superior cost her husband his family relationships? Does she care that her daughter is growing up isolated from cousins and relatives who would have loved her unconditionally? Does she ever reflect on why nobody in our family enjoys spending time with her? Probably not. People like Denise rarely engage in that kind of self-reflection. It's always someone else's fault. We were too sensitive. We didn't understand her standards. We weren't sophisticated enough to appreciate her refinement. But here's what I know for sure, the problem was never a dinner portion. The problem was never about proper etiquette or appropriate treatment. The problem was and always has been a woman who can't stand to be treated like everyone else because she believes she's inherently better than the people around her. That kind of arrogance doesn't just hurt the people she targets with her criticism, it hurts her own family. It cost Uncle Thomas his relationship with his parents, his siblings, and his nieces and nephews. It's costing Megan her childhood connections and teaching her terrible lessons about how to treat people. And for what? So Denise could feel superior at a family celebration? So she could prove that her daughter deserves special treatment? So she could turn my graduation party into a showcase for her own drama? Looking back, I'm almost glad it happened the way it did. If she was going to show her true nature, better that she did it so publicly and dramatically that nobody could pretend it was a misunderstanding. Everyone in that room saw exactly what kind of person she is, and there's no going back from that. My graduation party might not have been the perfect celebration my mom had envisioned, but it taught me something valuable about family loyalty, personal boundaries, and the importance of standing up to bullies, even when they're married to people you love. I graduated from college with honors. I'm now working as a third-grade teacher and loving every minute of it, and I'm surrounded by family members who support and celebrate my achievements without drama or conditions. Denise might have stolen some of the joy from that one evening, but she can't steal my accomplishments or my relationships with the people who truly matter. As for her, she's still married to Uncle Thomas, still criticizing everyone around her, and still wondering why nobody seems to appreciate her high standards. Some people never learn, and some people aren't worth teaching. I just feel sorry for Megan, growing up thinking that demanding special treatment is normal and that family members are expendable if they don't cater to your ego. That 12-year-old girl deserves so much better than the example she's being set. But that's not my responsibility to fix. My responsibility is to build the kind of life and relationships that bring joy instead of drama, kindness instead of superiority, and love instead of entitlement. And you know what? I think I'm doing just fine.